Okay, so I'm going to have to not look at myself. That's kind of hard.
Oh, you're, oh, look at that. I got a YouTube notification. Do I need to,
Can you just test the sound?
maybe, does Tracy
It's kind of,
know I'm here so she could text me? And
no, it's urgent. I just need you to test the sound.
I know, I'm trying
Yeah.
to find my thingy.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
There's a big delay, but yeah.
Oh, okay. There's a delay.
Like 10 seconds.
Okay. Oh, people are here. Great. Hi. Great. So people are already hopping on. That's fantastic. All right. Whoa. So we're on a couple of minutes to start. And hello, welcome to everyone who's hopping on now. That's fantastic. I'm going to start by just talking a little about the book and the publishing process, just while we wait for a few people to hop on. So yeah, today is Reclaiming Vitality, a healing journey through chronic fatigue and burnout. So Anne-Marie can't move her chair. It's the launch of Reclaiming Vitality, a healing journey through chronic fatigue and burnout today on Amazon. And it's free on Kindle between today and Sunday, which is wonderful. And I just wanted to share that already we're at number 1 on 2 categories, which is the category of spirituality and healing and the category of chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's really wonderful. And it's already moving up the charts we were over 3,000, number 3,050 something at the beginning of the day, early this morning. And now we're up to something between 1,000 and 2,000, 1,000, 1,500 on the list in total for Kindle free. Thanks, Robert. I can see you commenting. That's wonderful. And I just wanted to share that, the whole process, it has been amazing. It's been this round of writing and bringing the project to fruition has really been about almost exactly 3 years. And the first time I had the idea, as many of you know, is over 20 years ago. But in this 3 years, what's happened is I wrote during the summer in the mornings in the first year. And in fact, got COVID and long COVID. That was 2022, I think, 2022, yeah. And then had to work through the long COVID. And then I did the edit process and the rewrite process in the second summer in 2023. And then this year in the summer, we've been proofing and formatting, and it's really been huge. So it's really an amazing process. And I wanted to just, Alice, hello. I love your hearts and stars. That's wonderful. Yeah, it's been an amazing process. And this morning, I woke up and it almost felt like my birthday, this kind of, oh, wow, because the book has really been born. And, now it's its own person, really. So I'm sending it out into the world and just starting to receive feedback from people, unsolicited, which is really wonderful. So the process of writing, I was just going to talk a little bit about that. It's really similar to meditation. And meditation is one of the topics I'm going to raise today in regard to recovery from chronic fatigue. And there are similar things about recovery, writing, and meditation. For me, the three all dovetail. So the reason that the process of writing is similar to meditation is because it's very solitary, and it's also something that you do with your will. You really just you intimately with you, up against yourself, and you really see yourself on the page. You see where your gaps are, and you have to keep going back until you get it right, which is what's been happening for me. So just want to come back because we're reaching to 1 o'clock right now, which is really the start time of the live stream. And I just want to let you know what I'm going to talk about in this 45 minutes. So, of course, today is all about the publishing of the new book, Reclaiming Vitality, A Healing Journey Through Chronic Fatigue and Burnout. Yay! And then also I want to tell you a little bit about my story, what it is that, brought me here regarding recovering, obviously, from chronic fatigue and burnout. And I even did have an experience with long COVID. And my story also is as a practitioner, because I had chronic fatigue 20 years ago, and then I've been working since I recovered with clients around the world, in America, in Australia, in Europe, in Asia, working with clients to help them also recover. So there's a big backdrop of experience there and stories. So I want to share some of that with you. Of course, I'm going to define the topic, really what the book covers. The book covers chronic fatigue, burnout, and long COVID, and I'm going to define those things for you. And then the way that we're looking at it here is in looking through the lens of a model of consciousness called subtle bodies. And that's something that I really spell out in the book. It really goes into detail what that is. But essentially, it's about subtle energies and how that was so crucial, so key to my recovery and that of many others that I've worked with. And it's, in fact, something that I'm posing here is a missing link for many people with chronic fatigue or long COVID or burnout, because we're looking at the physical, we're looking at the emotional, and we're going, whoa, these things aren't making us totally better. And then there's something else. It's this energetic dimension, which I'm calling subtle bodies. Subtle bodies is a term that was coined by Samuel Sagan of the Clear Vision School, and he has a whole knowledge track about that, which I would highly recommend, called KT Subtle Bodies, the Fourfold Model. And I'm going to go through as well some things about meditation and technology, because in the journey of recovery and in the journey of research and helping others, and where we are in the world right now, it has come to my attention, and it's very central in the book, that technology is so key, and understanding how to manage technology and to use technology in our lives is so vital to what we're doing with recovery, and not just recovery, but thriving, right? So really, we're not avoiding. Here we are, we're on YouTube, we're on a live stream, I'm on video, you guys are watching me on video. We're not avoiding technology, but I'm going to just run through some things about how we can use technology in a way that works for us rather than against us. And that is on an individual level, but honestly, it's also on a whole macro level, globally as the human race. It's very exciting. Yay, I can see some more people popping on now. That's so wonderful. Karen, Brian, Candace, yay, hello. Special hello to Brian, who's in Australia, 6 a.m. That's wonderful. And I'm going to finish up with some tips about recovery, some practical things about flow and grasping, about working with your sleep, working with practical things in your life, like water, how amazing that is, being out in nature, and containment, boundaries with technology, things like that. Hey, Emma and John, that's so sweet. It's really lovely to see you all. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you. It's really sweet. We are, and Valerie, yay. So we are celebrating today. Paul, yay, congrats. Yes, we're celebrating the launch of, well, really my first book, Reclaiming Vitality, A Healing Journey Through Chronic Fatigue and Burnout. And as I was saying, I'm going to start right now just by sharing a little more about, well, actually the journey of writing the book, and just encouraging all of you, if you have a really big creative project and you really feel like you're, falling over yourself and not getting it right, or you don't know how to proceed, I would just say keep going. Find the help that you need to strive and to make it happen, because I just want to share it. It's a really beautiful feeling. So right now it's a bit like my birthday, a bit like I've given birth to the book, and now it's going to fly into the world and be its own thing. It's going to have its own life, and that's really amazing. So I wanted to read here. I got my first unsolicited comments, or it's kind of like a review. It's someone who's going to leave a review on Amazon, but she hasn't finished the book yet. And it's someone that doesn't know me, is not paid by me. She's just sent me this review from her own heart. She says, "Hi, Samantha. I've had a slow start with your book due to, let's just call it life in general. But I'm loving your book. It's right up my alley. Spirituality and the power of the mind-body. Subtle bodies is fascinating. I'm hoping this may be the kind of non-drug solution that we have been looking for. And your writing is wonderful. I will finish it soon and will be posting a 5-star review. Thank you." So if you're online, or if she's watching this later, thank you so much for that. It would really touch my heart. But, I think many of you who are creative will know it's really, I'm going to say it's really vulnerable, to put together something of yourself and then put it out there in the world. And to get that first review back a couple of days ago, it just was such a relief. It's just, oh, wow, she said my writing was wonderful. So, I mean, because, yeah, it's the internet, and, we have call-out culture, and there will be negative reviews, I'm sure, right? But to get that first review meant so much. So I want to move on to talk a little bit about chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID, burnout, and really the topic that the book covers. So chronic fatigue syndrome, in fact, it was really only defined in the late 1990s by the CDC and the World Health Organization. It is quite a vague description when you read the CDC. It's along the lines of someone that has long-term exacerbated fatigue for more than 6 months for no other known cause. And then there's a list of symptoms, like headaches that they didn't have before, waking up feeling sleepy, post-exercise reaction. So if you do a little bit of exercise, instead of feeling good, you crash. There's pain, and sometimes it moves into things like fibromyalgia. And then there's burnout, which is, of course, a different thing, right? So burnout is when someone hits the wall. So they're working really hard, and they just collapse emotionally and physically. And sometimes they can be out for 6 months, a year, in recovery. It just really depends where they are. And long COVID is obviously something that happens after the virus is finished, long COVID. And, it used to be called post-viral syndrome. And in fact, those things do have a crossover. In Australia, the researchers are actually saying that chronic fatigue and long COVID are the same thing. What I'm saying is it's not about whether or not they're exactly the same thing. They're different terms, they're different diagnoses that people can have. I'm saying there's a crossover, like a Venn diagram, with burnout and chronic fatigue and long COVID and post-viral fatigue. So post-viral fatigue is similar to chronic fatigue, really. Something where you have a collapsing or an illness that goes on for a long time after a heavy virus, and it's unexplained. And there's many treatments out there. People spend a lot of money, a lot of time. It's very debilitating. And what I'm talking about is where there's a crossover between those different diagnoses. People that are actually crashing and collapsing energetically in their subtle bodies. Generally, those people will have looked everywhere, done everything. Maybe, if it's you've pushed yourself really hard. Maybe, you've even been very, type A about your recovery, and you've gone to all the doctors and all the hospitals and all the alternative therapists as well, and you're still not getting better. Well, those people in that category may really benefit from having a look at the book and just seeing if the whole definition of managing your energy, collapsing in your subtle bodies, crashing, if it resonates with you. And if it does, there are directions and steps that you can take for your recovery. And I really want you to know, number one, the biggest thing I want you to know is that you can get better. So really passing hope to people who are suffering from unexplained, exacerbated fatigue for no known reason. So obviously you have all your medical tests and you try your treatments, and if it's still not getting better, I want you to know that there is a way. So can see some hearts and stars. That's so wonderful. Hi, hello everyone. Welcome. So I want to start to address in my story what happened. Spinning back to my 20s, and I'm now 52. So in my 20s, I was working as a finance journalist in the wire industry. So something like Reuters, Dow Jones, it was called Australian Associated Press, which was very fast-paced and very much, news by the second. The deadline was as it happened. That was the deadline. And it was fantastic. It was very fun. It was very fast. There was a kind of pack of us that would go around from the different newspapers and radio stations and other wire organizations, and we would go to this story, that story, this annual general meeting, these press conferences, and we were really like a pack. And sometimes there would be more or less of us, but generally you kind of got to know who you were up against, and we were competing. The whole idea was that you get the story out first. And what happened for me at that time was I had what I now would call a pretty big collapse in my subtle bodies. I did have some kind of virus. I did have some kind of virus. I did have an illness, and I didn't know what was going on. I had been very fit. I was a swimmer. I didn't actually get to professional level because I stopped before then, but I was pretty close to professional level when I was younger. I was out there swimming at the beach every day, doing exercise. I was eating pretty well. But I started to get to the point where I couldn't drink any alcohol. If I drank alcohol, I wouldn't stop vomiting. Food was just going right through me. I couldn't eat a lot of things. I mean, I don't want to go on and on. It's really boring. But it was very intense, And the biggest symptom is really this kind of brain fog, headaches, pain, and sort of flu-like symptoms that just go on and on. And it really took years for me to find out what was happening. I changed jobs. I moved countries. I went to London. I followed my dream. And at first I was very, very sick, and there was little gaps. Then I started to be better sometimes, and then dramatically worse. It was more of an up and down. And when that happened, so it was a couple of years later, I'd been to a number of specialists in Australia and in London in the UK. They had given me treatments. They had tried to help me, but nothing had got me better. But I started to observe, hey, this is amazing. When I'm in nature, so I went hiking in the Alps in France. It was incredible. And I was really well. I was hiking for 3 days and camping out, and it was fantastic. I was on my own, and I met some people, and my energy was really up. And then I went back to London, where I was working in another wire agency in London, and bang, my energy went down. It was just, really, you probably could define it as depression, but there's a physical element. It was just very heavy. And I started to feel like, what's going on there? Then I had a big shift. It was now 3 years in, and I always loved travel, and I wanted to go back to Africa where I was born. I was born in Malawi, and I went back to Africa with a friend, and it was incredible, to go back to where I was born. And I had this journey, which was, I was sick. I had the chronic fatigue. The doctors were saying, "You're mad. Why are you going?" I refused to take any kind of vaccinations. I took homeopathic remedies, which I think was really a big part of the shift that happened for me. And I took homeopathic remedies even for things that I didn't have yet, like, dysentery or other preventative things, cholera. They weren't in the area where I was going, but I had the treatments in case I needed them. Anyway, when I got to the place very close to where I was born, which is a huge lake, one of the biggest lakes in the world, I think it might be the 7th biggest freshwater lake in the world, and perhaps the 2nd biggest in Africa. You'd have to check those stats. But anyway, it's an incredible place. And I'd left when I was 4. So coming back, it was just, wow, this place is just so outside of, where I had been reporting on finance, where I'd been reporting on, the Dow Jones and Wall Street and companies. And honestly, I wasn't very happy. I did it in London. I did it in Sydney. And I had come to a place of realizing, the emptiness that's there behind that system. I didn't realize it, but I was really searching. And when I got to this place in Africa where, we didn't have any phones, there was no banks. I didn't actually have cash with me. I had been traveling on my Visa card, and some friends that I had just made on a bus, from London, they gave me £10. I mean, they were students. That was a lot of money for them to give me. And that's what I had for, 4 or 5 days to live off, which was enough. But it was just a totally different experience of life than I'd ever had. And I had a big opening, I would say, spiritually. There was a shift in consciousness that was very dramatic, and it really was internal, but it was sparked from the outside. And there was a knowing, oh, it's time to meditate. I want to meditate. And just so you know, I didn't want to meditate ever before that. Like, I just didn't want to. And at this time, my energy had really come back online. My vitality was back to 100%. I felt as good as I felt when I was doing, a lot of swimming and a lot of sport. And I didn't have any of the vestiges of chronic fatigue. But when I landed in Africa, I landed in Zimbabwe, I definitely had those chronic fatigue symptoms. So it was like, wow. So all of this is happening. And it wasn't that I was meditating to get better. That wasn't it. It was more that I was having this big opening, and at the same time, my symptoms were completely gone. and I was sort of not really thinking about it, putting the two together, because I was so in this big experience. And I started to have, inner vision, inner knowing, seeing things in other people, seeing things in myself, and just this compulsion really to meditate, a wanting, a longing to meditate. So I went back to London and really changed my life. And initially, I didn't have the chronic fatigue symptoms when I landed back, but within probably 6 weeks of landing, the chronic fatigue symptoms started to return, and I started to also meditate. And in the meditation, when I started to do some silent retreats, which, were really beautiful, with a Buddhist group there in London, I had a bit of a shift again. So these key shifts along the journey have been so important. You could call them like an aha moment, or a wake up. Something woke up inside. So while I was in a little weekend meditation retreat, and I was crashing. So I was fine when I entered the retreat, and then this heaviness started to descend, and the clouds and the pain and it was really intense. And I was just having to sit with it in silence, just to be with that intensity. And I had this realization again, this is energetic. It's not emotional. It's not physical. It's energetic. And at that time, I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't have a background in anything alternative. I had seen a homeopath. I had seen a naturopath, but that was about as alternative as it got for me. And I didn't have a spiritual background or a religious background at all. But I was meditating and it was just, oh, this is energetic. So I started to do some study. What does that mean? And it turns out that there's a whole numbers of systems actually that are pretty ancient that deal in the art of healing energy. So chi is life force. Chi is the word in the Chinese system for energy. Prana is the word in the Indian system for energy or life force. Life force is a better translation, actually. Energy is a bit of a vague term, but it is something that we all use because we know when we feel energized or vitalized, and we know when we feel not. It's very clear to us, right? So it turns out there's models that are there all about understanding and managing our energy and healing through energy. So did you know, this is a cool one, acupuncture, it's part of the Chinese traditional medicine system. And in ancient times, acupuncturists were paid while people were well, but they stopped paying their doctor, their acupuncturist, when they got sick. I love that, don't you? We should do that here, huh? Anyway, when I started to study all of these things, I went to a school in Sydney, and I met an amazing person, Ruth Helen Camden. You'll read all about her in the book, and she was talking about a model called subtle bodies. And this is a model that integrates modern experiences of consciousness and energy with ancient models. So an understanding that meets the modern person's needs, because we're not the same as we used to be, 100, 200 years ago. We're very different and we're fast changing, right? Our consciousness is changing. So she unpacked this model for me, and it actually had a whole bunch of techniques for addressing chronic fatigue. Now, I'm not going to go into all of that. It's in the book. You can read it. But just to say that within 6 months, I was back at work and I was almost symptom-free. And in a year, I was symptom-free. And this has been a system that I've used for 20 years to really manage and look after my energy. And to live, this very full life. I lived all over the world. I've worked with private clients. I learned to be an IST practitioner. I've given thousands of sessions, including to people who've had chronic fatigue. So that's, bang. That's all of that in a nutshell. And before I go on, I wanted to read you a quote that's really instrumental, and I'd say is probably the main reason that I wrote the book, really. And it's a quote by the man who ended up being my spiritual teacher, Samuel Sagan. And it's from the knowledge track, which you can buy online, Futsi's Mountain. There's a whole train of correspondence courses that you need to do to get there. But anyway, I'm going to read this. It's really something that he gave me. He was very gracious and gave me permission to use this quote in this work. So it was a prediction, and he said, the logical outcome of subtle body trends that are already solidly established, the 21st century will see a very dramatic increase in CFS-related health disorders. For some patients, chronic fatigue will become so bad that it will border psychosis. Sufferers will lie in bed with vacant eyes as if gone. CFS or CFP will take on proportions of an epidemic. Large numbers of people will be totally out of action, which could put significant stress on the resources of the community. And so, obviously we've just had COVID and a lot of people long COVID, and it's already started, but I think this is the beginning. And so what he's pointing to is the understanding of subtle bodies is going to be so key to how we navigate this challenge. You know, there are many challenges that we're going to face going forward, and we already are, right? And this extra piece of knowledge, it's not saying, oh, the way that, you know, traditional medicine sees things or Western science sees things is wrong. It's an extra piece of knowledge that can add to those systems. And even, for example, you know, when people go off planet, when people leave the earth really to live somewhere else, we're going to need the knowledge of subtle bodies to understand what's happening to our life force, right? And I'm just going to explain why. So what we're really talking about is two aspects of subtle bodies. The first one is consciousness, our thoughts and our emotions, where we're always thinking, right? We're always doing things with our mind. And it's so active, it's so stimulated in today's world. Right now, I'm here online. You guys are leaving comments. You're seeing me. Maybe you've got your phone. Maybe you've got something to do. Maybe someone's calling. You know, maybe there's things going on in the background. We're very highly stimulated throughout the day compared to if you think of someone 150 years ago who, you know, maybe they're on the land. Maybe they've got a farm or a market garden kind of thing, and they don't have computers. They don't have phones. They don't have electricity, and they're just really very grounded in the earth. And so increasingly we become more and more and more and more and more up here. Our consciousness is moving up, 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 up. And we're losing track of this. And that's the second part. Well, our physical body, but really also our life force, the vitality, the energy of our vitality. And this in the subtle bodies model is called etheric. And so our life force is so key to our well-being. For example, just think back to when you last, I don't know, went for a swim in the ocean, somewhere really beautiful, or you climbed a mountain and, you know, you exerted yourself, but, you know, when you reach that peak and you get to the view, you feel so alive, right? Or you're in nature, you're somewhere really beautiful, and you just lose the sense of your mind. The thoughts drop away and you start to just become one with this sense, this vibrancy, this aliveness of nature. And those experiences all of us have. We all have these experiences where our vital energy, that part of our consciousness that is life force is dominant, is most vibrant and full. We all have those times. I mean, something that comes to mind is if you, if you have a baby or you have a friend, it's probably better if it's a friend's baby, because if you have a baby, you're exhausted. But, you know, a friend or a family member has a baby. And when you pick the baby up, like there's just something special that happens because they're little balls of life force. They haven't yet got the mind. They're just alive, right? And it does something to us. Everyone opens up. They, even you're grumpy or you feel a little closed, and you see a baby, and it can really lift you because it's carrying this vibrancy of life. It's something else than the thoughts and the emotions. And the key here is those two things: our consciousness, our thoughts, our emotions, and our life force. They're meant to be harmonious. They're meant to go together well. But we're on this trajectory where the thoughts and the emotions are dominating our life force. And our life force, as we know, is becoming increasingly compromised, right? So we have like global warming, we have globalization, we have the fast pace of change in technology, the coming of AI. We'll probably all be on virtual reality. All of these things, they stimulate our mind, our consciousness, our thoughts, and that dominates the life force. So many people who I see, and they're increasingly young, they could be young. I was young, I was 28, right? I was 27, 28, 26, 27, 28 when I got sick. And People can be very young and really suffering from this imbalance. The other thing is we have food, right, that's not alive. A lot of food is very processed, or it's come from environments that don't have the level of life force that we used to have. So what I'm proposing here is, in terms of recovery, and recovering consciousness, recovering vitality, recovering so that we can thrive in our lives, it means cultivating a life force, learning how to look after it on a day-to-day basis so that we thrive, and really turning that around to mean, well, what if your technology, your thoughts, your life is working for you instead of working against you? Like, I've just found myself on social media for an hour or 2 hours, and I didn't mean to be, just scrolling. And that's even a term now. People have social media addiction or doom scrolling, and what if we take control of those things? So I just want to pause, because I realize we're on just after 1:30, and we're going to finish at 1:45. And I just want to ask you guys, do you have any questions, anything you want to share in the chats? Because I'd love to interact with you if there's things that you want to bring. And while we're kind of waiting, maybe if you're there, you want to shake up your hands, just give your body a bit of a shake, have a drink of water, stretch. That's one of the things I want to encourage everyone to do. Yeah, just give it a stretch. So yeah, encouraging any questions, stretching, shaking. Robert, what was your favorite part of writing the book? I think this is my favorite part, publishing it. The finished product, I'm not going to lie. Yeah, the finished product is definitely the favorite part. But along the way, there were amazing parts. So I want to say that the first round of writing, which was the summer of 2022, it was just very quiet, that was incredible. Just every morning I just put aside an hour to an hour and a half, and I was doing it 4 or 5 times a week, sometimes 6 times a week, but I did what I could, and I blocked that out of my schedule. So I was getting up early and just writing, and a lot of writers will say that. There's a great book, Writers on Writing, if you're interested, and a lot of writers, they put aside a time, and you just show up the same way when you're meditating. You put aside a time and you just show up and you do the time. And you might think to yourself, oh, I'm in a bad space, or I can't do it, or whatever's going on in terms of resistance, but I promise you will get something out of that day. And I would always start off with free writing. So just write it, and then you'd be surprised how you just flow into writing a chapter. So that was my second favorite. And Paul, did you not over push yourself in your spiritual practice to find recovery instead of intensifying your burnout? I don't quite understand. Well, did over pushing myself, I'm just going to go with that. Over pushing myself, I'm going to say, I think I'm an expert in over pushing myself. Like really in every area of my life, I can definitely be someone who does that. And that's why I talk about burnout in the book, because I definitely am very good at burnout and also now very good at recovery. In the book, I talk about a yin-yang approach. So the model of yin-yang in the Chinese system, it talks about not in terms of man and woman, but feminine and masculine as different aspects of our consciousness, starting to learn to bring this harmony between what we're calling the consciousness and the life force. So there's a couple of chapters which really go through that whole concept. And really what I'm talking about is in the pushing that, or the striving, that we tend to do in today's world. There's an aspect of what I'm going to call grasping. And I think everyone's familiar with that term, right? Like grasping. Everyone does it. That's really very fundamental to the body of consciousness, what Steiner calls the astral body, or in Samuel Sagan's model of subtle bodies, the astral body, thoughts and emotions. Its fundamental kind of tendency is to grasp. And we live in a world where this kind of lower masculine way of being is really celebrated. I think it hopefully is getting to the end of its day, honestly. But what it means is like you're the grind. We use that term, right? I'm in the grind. I'm grinding away. I'm grinding away at my work. And so even in the writing, say, there's no way I could grind that book out. In fact, the way that the whole of this book has flowed, it's been a teaching of this whole yin-yang mode, because as soon as I went into the yang, it didn't work. And I had to recalibrate and come back and figure out, okay, I need to move into that higher yin mode. And I do go into the whole model in the book, and it's a beautiful way of looking at managing your energy once you get past the phase of recovery from chronic fatigue where you're really crashing and collapsing and you're really sick. This is key. And I'm just still answering Paul's question here, and I will come to the others, but one experience I wanted to share, because he was talking about in my spiritual path of recovery. Well, when I was past recovery, but I was in my spiritual path and I was meditating, I was on a retreat. It was probably about 3 or 4 weeks of meditation. And I was having this phase where I was getting pain every morning. So I'd wake up with this kind of excruciating pain, much like a migraine. And it was a phase where I was actually better by lunchtime every day, but every day it seemed insurmountable. And where I was, we had to climb up a bit of a hill, to get to the meditation hall. And there was this moment, which I remember really clearly, where I started to understand more about this whole yin-yang kind of way of being, where I'm walking up the hill to meditate, and I'm feeling this kind of darkness, this physical pain, this just really fatigue, discomfort, difficult space. And at some point I just felt, but there's also some lightness here. Like it's never all one thing. And it was just like a moment of kind of curiosity, really, like, oh, I wonder if I look in my experience, in my awareness, as I'm walking up this hill, where's the lightness? And I could feel on the periphery this kind of very subtle levity. And I started to bring my awareness there instead of, when you have pain, when you have grasping, when you have intensity, it's kind of building in on itself. It has a momentum of its own. So instead of going into that momentum, I let it be there because I couldn't fix it in that moment. And I went to the levity, the lightness that was in the periphery. And I shifted it, but not in that moment, like over probably an hour or so. I reversed what was happening. And in fact, there are studies that show, and I should get the proper quotes for you, but that certain types of thoughts perpetuate the same type of thoughts. So if you're in a cycle, like a vicious cycle, we call it, of negativity, which is grasping, it could be anxiety, it could be depression. Those thoughts, those negative thoughts or fear, they tend to feed on each other. And then positive thoughts, like if you're having a good day, if you're feeling happy, if something good happens, if your heart opens, positive thoughts beget positive thoughts and create more of them. It's almost like this trajectory. It's similar to in recovery, but I want to say to you that it's not a perfect line. Like you will have this, right? While you're recovering, You will have the ups and downs. And what I want to emphasize is that in those studies, they're calling it thoughts, and there is an element to it that is thoughts, but it's energetic. There's a place where our body of energy collapses and crashes, and it has negative physical effects as well on our health. And this can be for someone with chronic fatigue syndrome or someone with long COVID. It can be very, very detrimental, very severe symptoms, but there's more minor experiences of that all of us have, on a long Zoom meeting, been to a heavy family gathering, you've had a difficult situation. We all have situations where we've been on a positive trajectory and something happens and we kind of have a minor little kind of dumping, crash, collapse, whatever you want to call it, where our energy really goes down. But it's much more exacerbated for someone with chronic fatigue. So I'm looking at the questions now. I think I just saw one that Brian said that he's drinking some water and taking the dog for a walk on the beach. So, okay, I hope that others of you can, once we finish up, we've just got 1 or 2 more minutes in case anyone has a question, but I hope that the rest of you can have an awesome afternoon and do something, take a leaf out of Brian's book there. If you can take the dog for a walk on the beach or something as wonderful as that, go for a walk in the trees, go to the garden. There's so much more I want to share with you. I didn't get through nearly half of what we were going to talk about today, but I don't want to push it longer, because one of the main things I want to say about managing your energy and managing technology, it's a word that I love, which is containment. So I first learned of this word from a man called Tristan Harris, who's doing a whole bunch of work around technology on a global level and how we manage, the upcoming challenge of working with AI and a lot of the amazing fast technologies that are coming. And they're using this word containment for the whole of humanity, that we need to contain what's coming so that it works for us. And I want to bring that word to a micro level and say, hey, one of the most practical things you can do, because technology can be draining, is, make it work for you. Don't get on your phone first thing in the morning. Don't sleep with your phone in the room. Turn your phone off and put it in another room. Put it in a lockbox if you have to. Many of my clients do that. Have a lockbox, or just, one client said to me, I have to put it out in the car, because even if I have a lockbox, I'll get up in the middle of the night and figure out how to take it out. So if you're in that category, make sure that you don't have that temptation, and make your sleep space really sacred. And have your first 30 minutes of the day without technology. Meditate, go for a walk, have a quiet breakfast, do something with your sweetie. But don't just jump straight on the phone or straight on the computer. And at night, have at least half an hour. It's better if it's 90 minutes without your technology. I know it's crazy, but read a physical book. And by the way, I have a physical book that you can get. It's called Reclaiming Vitality, A Healing Journey Through Chronic Fatigue and Burnout. It's on Amazon, it's on Kindle, it's free, but you could buy the physical book and read it at night, in that little sacred time when you're heading off to bed. Or, spend time with your sweetie. Do something lovely. But don't be on your phone. Don't be watching too much Netflix. Have that space before you go to bed, and it's going to make a big difference. Okay, everyone, I can see all your messages. It's so beautiful. Sending so much love. Okay, thank you. Bye.